before anyone ever fired up the roaring blast furnaces that later reshaped the world with steel. I learned that England's most valuable metal wasn't iron at all. It was tin. Out in the remote, windswept hills of Cornwall and Devon, medieval miners stumbled upon one of the few rich tin deposits in Europe. The stuff was so precious that it ended up influencing everything from the king's finances to the look of church buildings, from long-distance trade routes to the everyday pace of life in small villages. When you look at church bells, merchant ships, humble workshops, or even the busy markets around the Mediterranean, you start to see how this quiet little metal became a lifeline for the whole region. I always wondered why Cornish tin was so essential, and why folks across medieval England fought so hard to control it. It turns out Cornwall and Devon sit on one of the most remarkable geological patches in all of medieval Europe, a place where tin seemed to rise almost naturally out of the ground. In most other parts of the continent, any tin that once existed was either already mined out, buried too deep to reach, or stuck in unstable territories. But down on England's southwestern peninsula, the metal lay close to the surface. Medieval miners could track exposed veins right along riverbeds, across open moorlands, or along those rugged coastal cliffs. Because the tin was so easy to reach, Cornwall wasn't just productive, it was steady, which was rare in a time when metal supplies were notoriously unpredictable. By the 1100s, Cornwall and Devon were turning out the vast majority of all the usable tin in northern Europe. Older sources, like Brittany or the Erzgebirge, never came close to matching the scale or reliability of what came out of England's southwestern hills. Since tin was so scarce everywhere else, Cornwall's mines skyrocketed in value and turned this out-of-the-way region into a major economic frontier with influence that stretched across the continent. Political stability played a big part, too. England had relatively strong central control during the high medieval period, and that steady hand helped mining operations grow without the constant wars and disruptions that plagued other parts of Europe. Because of all this, Cornwall became one of the few dependable tin suppliers at a time when global production was tiny. Long before industrial imports existed, this concentration of tin made Cornwall something close to a monopoly. And that monopoly didn't just affect local jobs, it shaped the material culture of an entire medieval world. Tin mattered because it changed everything around it. When you mix tin with copper, you got bronze, one of the most indispensable materials of the Middle Ages. Everything from kitchenware to church bells, from weapon fittings to basic tools, relied on bronze. Tin gave that bronze its strength, smooth texture, and resistance to corrosion, making it far more practical than pure copper or the lower grades of iron that were common back then. For regular families, having cookware made from tin bronze meant having pots and pans that could stand up to the constant stress of open-fire cooking, boiling, and heating. And outside the home, monasteries and parish churches leaned heavily on tin-enhanced bronze, too. Bells, chalices, candlesticks, reliquaries. Pretty much any religious object that was meant to be sturdy and beautiful needed just the right amount of tin. As church construction boomed from the 12th through the 15th centuries, religious institutions became some of the biggest tin customers in England. Artisans and metalworkers relied on it as well, using tin to shape alloys, cast precise components, and create pieces that needed both strength and an attractive finish. Even the royal workshops counted on tin bronze for armor fittings, hinges, seals, and ceremonial gear. So, tin wasn't some fancy luxury metal, it was structural, something woven into daily life in ways most people don't realize today. That's exactly why Cornwall's deposits weren't just valuable, they were strategically crucial. One of the most unusual parts of this whole story is the stannary system, a legal framework medieval England set up specifically to keep tin production running smoothly and profitably. Miners in Cornwall and Devon worked under stannary laws, a bundle of rights and rules granted directly by the crown. These laws freed miners from many typical taxes and placed them under special courts where disputes were settled quickly. Back then, legal cases could drag on for months or even years, but the stannary courts worked at a pace that would surprise anyone familiar with medieval government. They acted in days. That speed was vital in an industry where delays could mean serious financial trouble. The crown appointed wardens of the stannaries to keep things fair and protect both the miners and the monarchy's interests. This system gave miners a kind of autonomy most medieval workers could only dream about. They were allowed to leave their lords to take mining jobs, form their own juries and handle disagreements without local barons interfering. With that kind of stability and freedom, investors, merchants, and smelters jumped into the business, helping production expand from the 1200s through the 1400s. Because of all of this, Cornwall became more than just a mining area. It turned into a legally protected economic zone unlike anything else in England. The Stannery Laws did more than just keep miners happy. They kept tin production steady and dependable, protecting the whole industry from the usual feudal squabbles that crippled so many other trades. Because of that legal stability, tin became one of the best-managed resources in all of medieval England. And honestly, considering how tough Cornwall's rugged landscape was, the miners had to be pretty inventive to get any metal out of it. They came up with surprisingly advanced methods for the time, all aimed at working the ore as efficiently as they could. The first big step was something called streaming. Miners would redirect water from nearby rivers and use the running current to wash away loose sediment, leaving behind the heavier, tin-rich gravel that settled at the bottom. It was a clever technique that allowed even a handful of workers to separate valuable ore from ordinary dirt with impressive accuracy. Once they gathered enough of that gravel, they hauled it off to the smelting huts. These places were hot. Charcoal furnaces had to reach extreme temperatures just to melt the metal free from its rocky shell. Skilled smelters worked bellows to control the airflow, making sure impurities drifted away while the molten tin glowed clean and bright at the bottom of the furnace. By the 1200s, miners had pushed beyond the easy surface deposits and learned how to tap deeper sediment layers. They improved their sluices, built better water channels, and carved out settling pits that increased the yield without wasting so much manpower. Every stage of production, washing, crushing, smelting, grew more refined over time. And even without anything we'd call modern equipment, these medieval workers kept output steady enough that England held onto its position as one of Europe's leading tin suppliers for centuries. Because of all that hard work, tin-bronze goods spread through nearly every corner of medieval England. In regular households, bronze cookware, pots, pans, ladles, oil lamps was prized because it held up under constant use. With people cooking over open flames or boiling water day after day, they needed tools that wouldn't rust or fall apart the way iron often did in damp climates. Bronze was simply more reliable, which made it essential whether you lived in a small country cottage or a busy city home. Higher up the social ladder, you'd find tin alloys built into castle life. Hinges, locks, decorative metalwork, and all kinds of mechanisms tucked into gates, armories, and kitchens. Cathedrals and monasteries used bronze for massive candelabras, ornate reliquaries, and sacred instruments, many of which depended on very precise alloy recipes to get the right strength, color, or even sound. Craftsmen leaned heavily on tin too. They needed it to make molds, cast detailed shapes, and forge tools for everything from woodworking to weaving. Even the king's officials relied on tin alloys. Coins, seals, and other symbols of authority required carefully mixed metals, which meant tin had a direct line into the heart of royal administration. Tin wasn't just for the wealthy, it cut across every level of medieval life. Its usefulness guaranteed steady demand, connecting Cornwall's miners with towns, markets, and church centers all across England. The medieval church, though, was probably the biggest tin customer of them all, and mostly because of its never-ending hunger for bells. Casting a church bell required bronze with about 20% tin, a balance that created the powerful, resonant sound needed for worship. During those centuries between the 1100s and 1400s, when England built churches at a dizzying pace, every new parish needed at least one bell, and many larger churches wanted several, each with its own purpose. Because of this building boom, even a small dip in tin production could ripple through religious life. Bell casting became a specialized craft, and master founders guarded their alloy formulas the way a modern chef guards a secret recipe. All of this depended on a consistent supply of top-quality Cornish tin. And beyond bells, the church needed tin bronze for everything. Chalices, candlesticks, reliquaries, incense burners, and countless decorative pieces. Monasteries, often wealthy centers of art and craftsmanship, consumed huge amounts of metal for daily rituals and architectural details. In a way, Cornwall's tin mines shaped not just the look of medieval Christianity but its soundscape too. Every bell that rang across fields, Towns or valleys echoed the labor of miners who dug that metal out of England's southwestern hills. And the story didn't end at England's shoreline. Cornish tin moved through some of the busiest trade routes in medieval Europe. Merchants loaded refined tin onto ships leaving ports like Foy and Plymouth, sending it first to Brittany and Normandy before it spread into wider continental markets. When I dug deeper into medieval trade, I realized just how far Cornish tin traveled. In Flanders, one of the most industrialist corners of Europe at the time, the booming cloth industry relied on tin for dyeing vats, metal tools, and the equipment used to finish fabrics. Flemish merchants quickly became some of Cornwall's most dependable customers. Farther south, Italian and Iberian traders valued English tin because their own Mediterranean deposits were running out or were too small to meet demand. Cities like Genoa, Venice, and Barcelona poured this tin into ship fittings, church hardware, and intricate bronze artwork, which made Cornish exports extremely desirable. Some of the tin even reached the Levant by way of Italian shipping fleets, showing just how wide the reach of England's mines really was. All these trade links strengthened Cornwall's connections to the Hanseatic League, to French coastal towns, and to the markets lining southern Europe, back when maritime routes basically defined who held economic and political power. Cornwall ended up sitting right at the center of this international web. Its tin wasn't just another product to buy and sell. It acted like a passport, opening doors to wealth, alliances, and long-distance commercial ties that stretched well beyond England's borders. For the English crown, tin meant more than money. It was a strategic asset that gave the monarchy financial security and political leverage. Kings placed stannary taxes on tin production, pulling in considerable revenue they could redirect into whatever they needed most: wars in France, new castles, fresh administrative reforms, or even defending the coast. Tin money kept England's military machine running and its government functioning. By keeping Cornwall's tin regions under direct royal oversight, the crown also prevented local barons from growing too powerful. Granting miners special privileges under royal authority ensured that profits moved upward to the king rather than sideways into the hands of feudal rivals. In this way, tin supported royal power in a part of England that might have otherwise splintered under independent lords. And because the king controlled export licenses, he could regulate the entire trade, deciding who was allowed to ship tin abroad and keeping prices high while stopping other factions from locking up the market. When you look at the whole picture, tin became a cornerstone of royal finance. Its steady income helped medieval kings project authority both at home and across Europe, making this rugged southwestern mining region surprisingly central to the strength of the English state. The miners themselves lived in an unusual spot within medieval society. Unlike most laborers who were weighed down by strict feudal duties, these men enjoyed a real sense of independence because of the stannary rights. They were free to leave their lords, sign on with whichever mining crews they preferred, and even take part in juries made up entirely of miners. That kind of mobility and autonomy was almost unheard of in a world built on rigid social ranks. Their expertise only raised their standing further. Tin mining called for specialized knowledge, spotting or veins, directing water systems, managing bellows, and overseeing the smelting process. Because the whole industry depended on their technical skill, seasoned miners had bargaining power that ordinary peasants could never dream of. Mining towns developed their own strong identities, shaped by shared work, shared risk, and shared rights. Places like Street Austell and Liskeard grew into stannary hubs where miners met to trade, settle legal matters, and organize the labor that kept the entire system running. These communities were tight-knit, built on trust, mutual support, and the hard, dangerous work of pulling tin out of the earth. Thanks to that stability, England could rely on a steady supply of tin, linking the everyday efforts of Cornish miners to the broader economic health of the kingdom and even to markets across Europe. Tin influenced far more than the mines themselves. It helped shape medieval life culturally, economically, and politically. You could see its impact everywhere. In the sturdy bronze cookware inside small cottages, in the grand cathedrals humming with the sound of tin bronze bells, and in the countless tools and objects that made daily life possible. Cornwall's unusual geology created a natural advantage that tied local workers to an international trade network stretching from Flanders to the Mediterranean. And more importantly, the story of tin highlights something powerful about the medieval world. Small, unassuming materials could have enormous consequences. The labor of thousands of miners, most of whose names are lost to history, connected their quiet English hillsides to royal treasuries, church rituals, and distant cities. Tin wasn't just a resource. It was a bridge between the physical landscape and the human world. It shaped village life, empowered working people, strengthened kings, and sent its voice ringing across Europe through the bells it helped create. Recognizing the true significance of this humble metal helps us see just how intertwined medieval society was with the quiet landscapes of Cornwall, and how even the smallest elements can influence the fate of entire civilizations.